This forum was conceived 2 years ago as a means of advancing the special defence, security, trade and technology partnership between the United States and the UK. And that's why it's such an honour to introduce our next two guests. Dame Karen Pierce is Her Majesty's Ambassador to the United States of America, and Ambassador Woody Johnson is the United States Ambassador to us here in the United Kingdom. I'm delighted to welcome them both now to discuss how important transatlantic collaboration is in this uncertain and turbulent time. And I would like to begin by asking each ambassador in turn to speak for a few minutes. Perhaps if I could ask Dame Karen first to make your statement.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Samira, and hello, Woody. And this is just fantastic to be with everybody at the Atlantic Future Forum, and particularly wonderful to be able to speak with Woody on this important but also enduring issue. Woody knows far more about the ship than I do, which makes me very envious, and I think I'm now owed a good tour of every single aircraft carrier the US Navy owns in recompense. But I was able to mention the Queen Elizabeth in the Security Council in my previous job when I was in New York, because she's a first in very many ways. But on this particular occasion, we were talking about women in peacekeeping. And of course, the Queen Elizabeth has a very good contingent of women serving on board her. You ask about the transatlantic relationship, Samira. I mean, it's a deep, profound, successful relationship. I'm often asked on various media outlets here, what about such and such problem? What about so-and-so? And I think the answer is, yes, there are policy disagreements. There have been policy disagreements between UK and US administrations going back for a very long time. But the fundamental is that we have a very deep bedrock, very sound bedrock of defence, military, intelligence and operational cooperation. But we also have in almost every corner, nook and cranny of public life, a very tightly woven cooperation at all levels. And therefore, whatever policy disagreements we may have on any given day, they either bounce off the bedrock or they get caught by the tightly interwoven nature of the relationship overall. In defence terms, I think if you put UK and US together, the contribution we make to NATO in terms of budget, in terms of nuclear umbrella, in terms of nuclear deterrent, we have our continuous at-sea deterrent, is absolutely vital, and it is unique. And it is unprecedented, I think, in any alliance, certainly since the end of the Second World War. And one of the reasons for this very close defence cooperation, it goes back to the Manhattan Project, it goes back to the 1958 Mutual Defence Agreement, and various other agreements that all flowed from that. And I think one of the most important things we can do between us at the moment, in such an unpredictable world, as you said, is to make sure we forge the same common purpose in tackling the new challenges that we face. And I'm thinking particularly of China, about which Robert O'Neill just spoke so eloquently, Robert O'Brien, spoke so eloquently, but not just China. If we think of all these new challenges of technology, of AI, of quantum, and of space, I like to think that we can have the same close collaboration with the US on all these new issues that we managed to devise when we put together the Mutual Defence Agreement. So thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to hearing what Woody has to say.
Thank you so much, Dame Karen, and of course we'll be in conversation. But welcome, Ambassador Johnson, and we welcome your statement now.
Well, thank you, Samira, and thank you, Karen. I hear you're doing a really fabulous job in DC. Everybody's saying how much they like you, so that's a great start. Over the last 2 days, we've heard some of the most impressive leaders from government, industry, and academia. As you said, from AI to hypersonics, energy, free trade, and COVID. We've heard about the big challenges that are ahead for all of us. And we've identified some of the opportunities that will propel both of our countries into the future. Congratulations to the Atlantic Future Forum for organizing this event on the ship. And thanks to Lord Sedwell also for hosting it from the incredible HMS Queen Elizabeth. I remember my first visit to the ship. It was one morning, and we had to wait out in the ocean out of New York Harbor until the tide went down so we could fit under the Verrazano Bridge. But coming into my home port and watching the bagpiper on the launch deck, he was all the way in the top of that. It was frozen. I don't know how he did this. Maybe the bagpipe was keeping him warm, but it was an incredible thing. On my third visit, most recently, they asked me to come again, and I went out before a big exercise. I was to go out on a Merlin chopper. That's a gigantic helicopter. But before I got onto the chopper, they said, well, there's just one little thing you have to do. You have to put on this survival suit. So this is something the men on the ship do every day. But for me, with my suit on, similar to this, trying to get into this thing, well, it took 3 cadets to haul me into this and get me in. And then I'd take it off and put it back on. But one thing that I saw, which really gave me goosebumps, was to see U.S. Marines and Royal Marines flying F-35 from the deck of the HMS Queen Elizabeth. What a sight. And it was just going like clockwork, amazing. You know, I've been ambassador to the UK for a little over 3 years now. It was the honor of my life to be asked to do this job by President Trump. The bond between the US and the UK is like no other. Our relationship started 400 years ago when the first pilgrims crossed the Atlantic on the Mayflower. Since then, we've accomplished so many things by working together. Apollo 11 would not have succeeded without the brilliant British scientist, Tom Bacon, who developed the fuel cell. So I was appointed by President. When I was appointed, he gave me very, very clear directions, as President Trump does. He said, Woody, this is a special relationship. Don't screw it up. So don't screw it up. So the U.S. is the most important partner. It has everything you could want in an ally. Common language, history, shared outlook on business, trade, free enterprise, and all those things. The best universities. We may have a few more, but you have the top notch. And most importantly, Britain has the same fundamental shared values: the commitment to human rights, the commitment to the rule of law, and an unshakable commitment to the defense of the free world. The UK, like the US, is a company with a global outlook. We both want to act as a force for good in the world. That's why, as Ambassador O'Brien just said a minute ago, our partnership with the UK is the bedrock of America's security and prosperity. There is a level of trust, collaboration, and interoperability between our two countries that you won't find anywhere else. And it's not just our defense that's important. It's the defense of almost 1 billion people. The US-UK relationship is at the heart of NATO. Ambassador Hutchinson earlier made the call to all of us. The US commitment to NATO is ironclad. The threats to our collective security, as Karen suggested, is very real, and we have to take them seriously. We cannot afford to underestimate countries like Russia, Iran, or China. We've seen the reality of how little they can be trusted. As O'Brien also said, even during the global pandemic, China was still launching cyber espionage attacks against Western companies as they tried to find a vaccine. So we need NATO to continue to protect our way of life, with the US and the UK leading the way, as we always have. The partnership is also vital for our shared prosperity. We trade more than $270 billion a year together. We have 1 million Brits who work at American companies, and we have 1 million Americans that work at British companies. including 45,000 Americans that work in my home state of New Jersey. The US and the UK are the single largest investors in each other's economies. There's well over $1 trillion in bilateral direct investment. And we've accomplished this under WTO, which is amazing. As things stand, US and the UK businesses still have to overcome a lot of these obstacles to trade. President Trump put the free trade agreement between our countries at the front of the line. A free trade agreement is the fastest way to increase prosperity in our countries. It's the fastest way anyway. Brexit gave us our first chance in 40 years, gives us our first chance in 40 years to accomplish this by removing obstacles to trade. And as you've heard from Ambassador Lighthizer and Secretary of State Truss, we're making great progress in this historic agreement. In fact, we're in the 5th round of negotiations and have had over 400 meetings, which is a lot in this short a time period. And we're making progress fast. We have a few things to iron out, as always, in agreements like this, but I'm confident that we can get this done. Post-COVID, jobs will be our #1 priority. And right now, the US and the UK have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to strike a deal that will jumpstart that growth. So 3 years later, I'm proud to report back to the president that the special relationship is only getting stronger. The US and the UK continue to move forward into the future side by side. We're fighting COVID together. We're creating jobs and opportunities together. We're protecting our way of life together. That's what we've been doing for 400 years, and that's what we'll continue to do. And really, that's what the special relationship is really all about. Thank you.
Ambassador Johnson, thank you. And in the time that we have, I would like to follow up both your remarks with a couple of further areas of interest. Ambassador Johnson, you mentioned, the UK and US F-35 jets taking off together here on HMS Queen Elizabeth for the first time, how powerful an image that was of the alliance. It showcased how the military are working together on both sides of the Atlantic. Can I ask a bit more about how key that relationship is now in the middle of the pandemic? Ambassador Johnson first.
Well, it couldn't be more key, because one of the things that you have to do during something as debilitating as this pandemic has been is keep your eye on the ball with security. And because you never want to be vulnerable, particularly when you're focused one way and, bad things can happen another way. So this is really a demonstration project between how our two countries can work efficiently together for each other's interest, our own sovereign interest. But together, we're much, much stronger. And we're doing this as I've come to know as ambassador, and I get to know all the things that we're doing with security over here. It's so impressive. Kind of if the American people knew all of the good things that we're capable of doing, and we are doing, and the smart people we have working on these projects for their benefit, I think they would be very proud.
Thank you. And Dame Karen, the same question to you about your insight into how the relationship is working amidst the pandemic with all the stresses, but I guess also the opportunities that there might be within that.
Yes, I think I very much agree with Woody. I think there are two aspects to this. One is the cooperation on tackling the pandemic itself. So we share science, we share medical information, we have people seconded into each other's medical facilities, including military ones. We develop vaccines together, both through the academic research, but also through the commercial companies, and we share the data. For example, in Britain, we've got a study underway as to why certain ethnic groups are more affected by worse outcomes. And when we get that, we'll be happy to share that with our American counterparts. Then I think you have the more strategic level, and that's where we are determined, Boris Johnson is determined, that the outcome of the COVID recovery has to be one which reinforces open societies. which reinforces transparency, liberal democracy, open trading systems. And that's, again, exactly as Woody was saying, that is, again, a very important area where the UK and US acting together in this demonstrably successful alliance can really lead the way. And then when you break that down, there's all sorts of important things around sustainable and green recovery. There's all sorts of important things around economic resilience and what we do with supply chains. There's a lot of work to be done on that. But it's vital that we show that we, as an open society, are leading the way on COVID recovery, and that authoritarianism actually is starting to have had its day. And I think that theme is one we're going to hear much more of. We, the Brits, will take over from the Americans in the G7 chair at the beginning of the year. And as I say, I think you'll hear more of this economic resilience and open societies.
Speaking of economic resilience, Ambassador Johnson, you said that President Trump had put getting a free trade agreement at the front of the line. Negotiations have, of course, been going on for a while. Given the proximity of the presidential elections, could I ask how much longer we will be waiting for that trade deal to be finalized?
Well, you know, it takes two to tango. So I think the progress we've made so far with Robert Lighthizer and your Secretary of State Truss has been phenomenal, as I said. And I think it's all been done virtually, but they've had many more meetings in these rounds than they've had before. And we're starting to put the words on the page and agreeing to those. So, you know, nobody's going to sign an agreement they don't want to sign. So when it gets to the point where we have what we need, it's going to be absolutely, I think, absolutely phenomenal between our two countries. We're already, as I said, trading a lot, and we're trading on a WTO, which is very, very difficult. And so this immediately makes it cheaper, less expensive, and easier, less regulations. And if you make things easier and cheaper, you get more of it. And so this I think translates quickly into jobs. And I know it's your objective in this country to have jobs, more jobs, and it's certainly ours. So this is our number one objective.
Dame Karen.
Yes, I think we're doing really well. You heard from Ambassador Lighthizer and Secretary Truss earlier in the session. We've got the 5th round coming up. One of the things we're making great progress on is small and medium-sized enterprises. And I highlight that particularly because I think there is a general feeling that to come out of the COVID pandemic well, we've really got to get small and medium-sized businesses back in top form again. So that's incredibly important. And we also want this agreement between the UK and the US to be something of a standard bearer for digital commerce. Now, that's very new. To the best of my knowledge, no free trade agreement, bilateral free trade agreement, includes the digital side. So we really want to get on top of that and hopefully, as I say, create a standard for other trade agreements to follow. So everybody will be working intensely. We're not going to put ourselves under a precise deadline. I like to use the word expeditiously. We do know that there are some difficult subjects coming up. Agriculture is difficult in all trade deals, and we will have to find a way through that. But to be honest, I'm confident we can find a way through, because we are each other's closest partners. As Woody said earlier, we have very similar ways of approaching these economic issues, and I think we'll get through.
Thank you. I have a final question to put to you both, and I'm going to ask Dame Karen first. Focusing on the NATO alliance, obviously in the longer term we are facing a global recession. Defence budgets often get cut in global recessions. Could I ask you both where you think the NATO alliance will be a year from now? Dame Karen first.
I'm quite excited about NATO, to be honest. I think under Secretary General Stoltenberg in particular, it has really got a grip of what its future role might be. And they have lots of strategic work going on about how to deal with problems arising in Asia that affect our security, how to deal with counterterrorism, how to deal with training other countries to look after their own security more effectively. And that, of course, in turn, helps reduce the threats to the UK and the US. So I think actually, having watched NATO throughout my career at various points, I think it's not too much to say this is the best I've actually ever seen NATO get at looking at these future challenges, looking at the technology that I was mentioning earlier, and working out where NATO and NATO member states fit in. So I'm actually quite excited about this.
And Ambassador Johnson, the same final question to you.
Well, I mean, Karen answered it. You know, the fact that NATO is more important now than it was when it was first agreed to, which was, I think it was agreed to, and everybody thought it would only last 3 years. 75 years later, it's still going, I believe. And Stoltenberg has been a great leader. And I think the Americans and British have both added a lot to how we can go together with Europe and defend ourselves, because our security is number one. We can't really do anything if we don't feel secure, and if our businesses and our people, which is our number one obligation to the public, aren't safe and don't feel safe. So we have to constantly get better. The challenges are different every year, and our adversaries are also improving dramatically every year. But from what I see, there is a major commitment in this country. I know there is in the U.S. And I think with us sticking together, we can play our part in Europe and hopefully get some of the others to be much more productive and recognize that these are ideas that you can't use budgetary treatments or anything to get out of them. I mean, it's really so important to keep continuity with the ability to defend yourself. And through NATO, you've got that ability. So I'm all in favor of it. I know O'Brien talked about it, and a lot of people have talked about it. We have to continue talking about it, because every day you have an argument to make that argument successfully, which I think we are.
Well, thank you for talking about it with us here at the Atlantic Future Forum. Ambassador Woody Johnson, Ambassador Karen Pierce, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us and for emphasising the importance of transatlantic partnership.